Hello and happy Monday evening.
Happy Monday evening, one and all.
Hope you are all well.
Yes.
In better humour than Rachel Reeves?
Well, I mean, most people are, I think, these days. But
Yes.
so it's been a funny old day, as they say, for the Labour Party or Labour government, because it's been the CBI conference, and
The Confederation of British Industry.
that's right, i.e. big business rather than small business.
Yeah.
And how long ago the Labour Investor Summit seems, eh? Do you remember when all those
that
platitudes...
2 weeks ago? Or
yeah, exactly. The platitudes about
68 billion.
the great new partnership.
Yeah.
Since the budget, it's been a pretty abrasive relationship between particularly business and the government. And what happened today was that Ray Newton-Smith, who's the head of the CBI, really went for it and said, I'm quoting, "Tax rises like this must never again simply be done to business." And she was referring mainly, I think, to the new national insurance hikes, 25 billion on employers, and higher minimum wage and some employment reforms, and the general moaning about the consequences for business. And Reeves' response in her speech was quite typical of something we've talked about, which is this, well, what would you do?
Yeah.
Trope. So she actually said, I have heard lots of responses to the government's first budget, but I've heard no alternatives.
Well, that's a fucking lie.
I
There's
mean,
lots of alternatives have been floated.
All over the place.
Just alternatives that they've ruled out.
Yes.
Irrationally.
But she and Keir Starmer both use this now routinely to say, well, what would you do? And when people say, well, this is what we do, they go, see, I told you didn't have any ideas.
And it's clearly come from Downing Street, hasn't it? As a methodology.
It's a strategy.
Because Wes Streeting's used it as well.
Yes.
Who we've got a lot of time for. But
Yeah.
Wes Streeting said, well,
what would you do?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a big mistake because it's defensive at a time when they should be on the attack. I mean, they should be explaining and persuading and standing their ground, but not standing their ground in a kind of captious and huffy way.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about that. I mean, just broadening it out. I don't know what you think now. We're almost a week on from the farmers' march, and I think taken with this, the sort of CBI kicking back and the farmers having, at minimum a good day out in terms of media coverage.
Yeah.
What you're seeing is the government losing control of the narrative of the budget.
Yeah. I mean, not only the budget, I don't think it would be overstating it, I think, to say they've lost control of the narrative. I haven't seen a narrative that they can lose control of. I keep hearing...
Yeah, absolutely.
At the beginning of this government, we kept hearing a lot about the battle between Sue Gray and Morgan McSweeney. And Morgan McSweeney being painted as this guru, this guy who came out and created this roadmap for the sort of Dominic Cummings, Svengali figure of the left.
Yeah.
But what's his output is what I would ask.
I don't know. And I'm puzzled because the farmers thing was interesting because they did get a good, the farmers did well. They managed to frame the changes to inheritance tax as a tractor tax.
Yeah.
And they had a whole sort of stage full of people opposing it, ranging from Clarkson to Ed Davey and everything. And actually, what was surprising to me was that there wasn't really a real pushback from the government. Say, look, we hear you, understand, it's tough times, but this is in the broader context of a big change that's going to have to be socially around wealth taxes. And it's not townies picking on the countryside. We totally get that there are, as we sort of develop the policy, there are problems we need to work on. I mean, for example, the thresholds might need to be adjusted and the time you can pay the tax might need to be adjusted. But it is an anomaly that farmers enjoy this relief.
Yeah.
And as we move into a new relationship between wealth and tax, this is just one of many things that's going to have to be done. And the more I think about it, the more I think that Reeves and indeed Starmer missed a massive trick in the budget in not just doing something that was obviously biffing the super rich
Yeah.
in a way that people in the pub can say.
You see, if I had James Dyson as a target,
Yes.
right, if he was in the other corner of the ring,
Right.
I would absolutely love it.
It'd be great, wouldn't it?
The guy is set up to be
Set
knocked
up.
down. Right, he is a hypocrite. He's backed Brexit. He's moved things out of the country subsequently. He's no question about his genius as an entrepreneur and an inventor. No doubt about that. And in some ways, this is what makes it even more bitter: is that the guy should represent the best of British, but he's a guy who is cynically, for reasons of tax avoidance, hoovered up hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland, so he won't pay inheritance tax on it. Now, and he says, "Oh no, I've invested lots and lots and lots," but he's invested lots in it in the knowledge that none of it will be affected by taxation when he dies. So who wouldn't invest in something that there was never going to be any payback on?
So you've got a situation now where actually, on the farm issue, you're really not going to be paying tax before £3 million, right? Which is not bad.
Yeah.
But it would have been good, I think, to have had that alongside a look at inheritance tax on shares,
right,
which are very generously treated at the moment.
Yeah.
If you sell them in the first 3 years after you inherit them, you don't pay any tax at all, right?
Matt, what's missing to me is, and it's something that's been a chronic complaint of ours, is what does it all add up to? What is the whole principle behind what's happening? We've seen a sequence of tactical responses to this black hole.
It is a pudding without a theme.
But
That's the problem.
But what's the strategy? Because if I was a chief exec and I was telling a board the strategy is growth,
I honestly
the next question is how?
That and also, taking difficult decisions but not really explaining them. And when you do, explaining them in a very retrospective way. So their whole shtick has been the Tories left us with a black hole. Well, that's fine. But the reason they're going to have to raise taxes and spend more is not just because of the Tories. It's because the world is changing dramatically, and we're going to have bigger, smarter statecraft to deal with generational change and social care and healthcare and climate and
increasing
pandemic
nationalism and
everything. This is just population mobility. Exactly.
Yeah.
We're just going to have to find new ways of raising money, and that takes a big, bold story. And the best time to enunciate that story is at the start.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember who it was who said of government that the first 6 months are the only months.
Really?
Yeah.
Smart.
I mean, it might have been American. I don't know. But it's true in the sense that in these months you are unusually scrutinized by a public that's rapidly going to lose interest.
Yeah.
And they form their impressions if they haven't already.
Yeah. And we've got a situation this week, and this is such dickheadery, right?
Yeah.
But it's been spotted and seized upon by all the usual suspects, which is this bloody petition.
Yeah.
Calling for another general election.
Yes.
Because Labour told us lies.
Yes.
Right. Now, one, it's a waste of everybody's time because it's never going to happen. Two, it's given the characters like Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and all of the usual guys.
Helped by Elon Musk.
Elon Musk, yeah, exactly. And there's now north of 2 million on it. But where it is effective is when Keir Starmer sits down on the couch, as you pointed out to me on WhatsApp earlier today, sits down on the couch on daytime TV. And the question then is, 2 million people want a change of government, Prime Minister. Why is that? And his only answer is, well, I'm not surprised.
Lots of people don't like me.
I'm not surprised.
And then he went back to discussing his pasta bake, which is very nice, I'm sure. But it was kind of tragic. I mean, what you're seeing there is, and actually what we're seeing generally, I think, and this is where I think this new government is deeply worrying, is it's in fact a very old-fashioned government.
Right.
It's technocratic. Starmer genuinely believes that the public square is basically a big courtroom, and if he marshals his evidence and facts and argument in the way that a barrister would, everyone will come round. And if that was ever true, it certainly isn't true now. Versus the completely deranged gestural politics of Farage and Tice and co, which, as you completely correctly said, falls apart at the merest, dash of scrutiny. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But what it does is it creates a kind of it's sort of empty carbs politics, because what it does is it creates this surge of interest, and it's all over the media now. Look at this big petition. Already people are wanting another election. I don't think they are. I mean, I think a lot of people will be signing this in anger. I think they would be very, very surprised if Starmer said, "Oh, okay, we'll have another election."
Do you know what I think is driving it? And I think, this will sound like a facetious point, but it's not. It's a very serious point, and I think it's a characteristic of politics in the 21st century. They're signing it for a laugh.
Totally.
And they're doing it because it's a wind-up.
It's
they're doing
trolling.
it because it's a great big trolling session.
When Musk says Britain has gone full Stalin, he knows perfectly well that Britain hasn't gone full Stalin. But it's funny, and it amuses people. And because Starmer and Rees are so earnest, this kind of poking and trolling is fun, right? It's extremely malicious. It's very malevolent, and it disrupts the business of government. But I'm afraid that they've got a problem here, because they haven't taken the vaccine, so to speak. They don't have the immune system to deal with this, right?
I mean, you can imagine Blair. Right? I'm not a Blair fanboy, but you can imagine Blair sat on that couch with the presenter saying, "What about this call for 2 million people, Prime Minister?" He would have just laughed and said, "Oh, for God's sake, you don't go along with this nonsense." But Keir sits there and go, "How can I litigate this question?"
Or when there was the fuel blockades, and he would say, "Yeah, I get it, it's a problem, and here's how I'm going to deal with it." Right? Not, a lot of people don't like me, do they? But I do a mean tandoori salmon.
Was that the pasta?
That was the other one. There was at the end. It was a bit like the "and finally."
Was this the running through the wheat fields moment?
No, it was kind of, they did the serious stuff,
right?
And then there was the kind of wacky stuff at the end, and the stuff about his new cat and whether he likes to cook. And he said, I do a mean pasta bake, and I do a mean something. And Andy Peters, brilliant. Yeah. But there was this horrible sense of, Mr. Bean, travels from number 10 to the couch to explain, how out of not out of touch he is. And I do worry about it, because a lot rests on his shoulders.
It does. Listen, I'll tell you what, there was one, and by the way, we are conscious that we get a lot of people emailing us saying,
"Why aren't you
give
nicer?
them a chance, why are you knocking them down?" And believe you me, it's not through any desire to kick people. It's through a frustration that there's a job that needs doing, and it's not happening right now. One silver lining is that we are not being run by some far-right ideologue Nazi yet. But many people are
planning,
and certainly planning. And there is a major problem with it's not anomalous anymore. It's a definite thing. The rise of the far right in Europe. And we're going to come back in a minute and talk about that.
Let's do that.
So, Matt, today we've seen this character, Georgescu.
Călin Georgescu.
In Romania.
Yes.
Who's come out of nowhere, no party affiliation, just TikTok videos and appeals to make Romania great again.
Sort of TikTok videos and Nazism, really.
Yeah, a bit of TikTok Nazis.
Yes.
Yeah. Seems to be an effective combo.
Seems to be the new combo.
Because he is now leading the vote to become
President
of Romania.
Yes.
No small thing.
I mean, you do have to wonder, in parenthesis, how this was achieved, because he was polling at 5% and he achieved nearly 23%. Now, I'm not saying that there's been some interference,
chicanery.
But it is a little bit weird.
Suggesting there might be some chicanery.
Anyway, I mean,
it would be handy for Putin, wouldn't it, if this guy won?
Well, very much so.
Yeah.
And this guy Georgescu is an absolute sort of central casting nationalist leader of the sort we've been talking about on the podcast ever since we started. He's very religious, very nativist, totally anti-NATO, and bizarrely, and this is one of the weird sort of, it is quite Nazi actually, very much in favour of self-sufficiency and autarky and all that. I mean, he's a very odd guy. And
what was that last word you used?
Autarky.
What's that?
It means self-sufficiency.
Autarky.
Autarky.
How do you spell that?
Well, the German I think is Autarky,
Right.
but you can have it as with Archy.
Every day's a school
And
day.
Hitler was
He was an autarkist.
big time.
Yeah.
He wasn't into imports, right? And it's a very funny sort of aspect of you see it on the far right everywhere, which is we must be self-sufficient. It's a kind of survivalist thing. It's very strange. So this guy there's going to be a runoff in 2 weeks, December the 8th, and we'll see if he becomes president. But the point that really matters is the point you made just before the break, which is this is not an anomaly anymore. I mean, there was a time when these things happened from time to time. Jörg Haider in Austria, and you'd go, well, that'll sort itself out. But it's now happening pretty much everywhere.
I mean, we've got the Czech Republic, we've got Finland, we've got Estonia,
the Netherlands,
we've got the Geert-Wilders in the Netherlands,
Austria.
Sweden is dependent on nationalists.
Very
Italy, of course.
Yep.
Although weirdly, Maloney's sort of turning out to be one of the less problematic far-right
I think
characters,
Maloney is trying to establish herself as the sort of semi-human face of MAGA Europe.
Yeah, right.
I mean, she's a great protege of Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
And she was a fascist in her teen years.
Yes, she
One
was,
must never forget that.
No.
But you're right.
We've got the ADF, of course, in Germany.
In Germany, who are making considerable gains slowly but surely, and then France, where the French story is in a way the one that troubles me most, because there's a sort of ratchet effect with the Le Pen family that's been going on now for decades. Every time they get a little bit closer, and now Marine Le Pen, she's planning her fourth run at the presidency in 2027. She's got legal problems, but she's only 56, and she is threatening to bring down Barnier's government over the budget, which may or may not happen. But I suppose the problem we've got here is that the far right has real power now on the continent and elsewhere and further afield. Yeah. And you can't just do what we used to do, which was to say, this is very concerning, we need to deal with it. I mean, actually, you're looking at a global phenomenon.
Yeah, well, it's almost the reverse now, where they're looking at us saying they're very concerning, we need to deal with them.
Yeah.
And because you're right, it's global. It's all these European countries we've talked about. It's Argentina, it's
Georgia.
India, Georgia is
contested,
being run by the Georgian Dream. Very pro-Russian.
Another case of people worrying about intervention and
I mean, the only thread between them all is you can call them fascist and far right and this, that, and the other, but the only real common thread is that they are extreme nationalists.
They are, and this often manifests itself in a complete lack of interest in NATO. So Romania has a 400-mile border with Ukraine.
Yeah,
and Georgescu has made it very clear what he said. He doesn't want there to be any NATO involvement in Romanian's politics. It's a massive change. I mean, the words he used, and he did a Facebook post, and it sort of captures the whole spirit of this movement, which is, he said, for the just, for the humiliated, for those who feel they do not matter and actually matter the most, the vote is a prayer for the nation. So that's got all the elements we've been following, the left behind, the disenfranchised, religion.
Well, it's the Sermon on the Mount, isn't it?
It's the Sermon on the Mount. And
you who have nothing will have everything.
It's meant to sound compassionate, but actually, it's a very poisonous message.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's nationalist, which means heavily anti-migrant, and also then in a way that is clear and present in terms of the peril. This growing surge on the right around the world to stop aid to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And that, I fear, is, I mean, my honest fear is, I think, if you look at the whole board, it's already happened.
Well, Patience Wheatcroft's written a great piece for the New European,
right,
where she points out the obvious fact that is, if there's a settlement, there's going to be a huge wave of migration throughout. Of people displacement from Ukraine, from the areas that are, given away, into the rest of the continent.
Yes.
So they'll stream across into Romania,
Romania,
anywhere they can get to. So
it will exacerbate the very problems that nationalists complain about.
Exactly.
I mean, the idea that this will be a quick, clean end is really, really absurd and juvenile. It may end up with Ukraine getting completely. Well, I think it will end up with Ukraine getting shafted in a deal. To be honest, but as you say, Matt, that it will then also end up with a massive displacement and huge groups of people having to go elsewhere.
Yeah. The other thing, just to throw into the conversation while we're talking about people displacements, is the news that the boat crossings have actually increased this year. So this smash the gangs thing, you might have some bloke in a court somewhere with rubber dinghies. Well, congratulations, but the problem is getting worse. It's not getting any better.
Until a centrist government or a centrist candidate in America trying to get into power like Harris was, offers a completely new reset on migration, we are sunk. Because the way in which, I mean, for me, this is actually the biggest disappointment, which is that Rwanda was clearly not only despicable, but expensive and pointless.
Yeah.
And the Stop the Boats slogan was ridiculous and didn't work. And there was an opportunity for a really bold reset, which was say, this isn't working, guys. We've got to get real about migration. It's a good thing. We need border security, but it needs to be compassionate and well-resourced.
Yeah.
Comes back to taxes. And they didn't do that. What they did was they just flipped Stop the Boats to Smash the Gangs.
Yeah.
Now, Smash the Gangs might have an impact. I don't know. But the idea that that's the answer.
Well, the other thing that occurred to me, do you remember when Chris Patton was going through the handing over of Hong Kong to the Chinese, and Thatcher said, I think it was Thatcher that said, look, the Chinese could have just turned off the water at any point, right? We had no choice.
Yes.
Right. That reminded me of the mayors of the northern coast of France getting together saying, we're fed up of this, of policing it. Yes, Rishi Sunak has given 500 million quid or whatever over a few years to pay for the policing of it. But if the French withdrew the right for the British after Brexit to do border checks on French soil and just put these people on ferries, then they would arrive in Dover and you either stop the ferry service and we are literally cut off then to stop but that could easily happen. The French could easily say, we've had enough of it.
It could easily happen.
You deal with it.
Particularly in the light of what we were just discussing about Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, as early as the middle of next year, I think you could see a very, very big surge of refugees coming from Ukraine.
If I was the mayor of Calais or Le Havre or one of these places, and I had thousands of people hiding in sand dunes on my public beach and queuing up for soup and bread at night because they're shivering and cold and sleeping rough, I'd say that put them on the bloody ferry.
Yeah.
So if they want to get to England, why are we stopping them going to England?
And when they get here, they are not allowed to work.
No.
They are put up in hostels or not anymore, but that appalling barge, the Baby Stockholm, which really is the definition of hell on water.
That's been closed
It's been
down,
mothballed. It's been mothballed, thank God. But I mean, it was a symbol, I think, of how, along with the Rwanda nonsense, of how absolutely unthought through this was and how gestural it was. Now, populist right-wing governments, that's what they do. They do gestures. They build walls, they have barges and all that. Progressive governments are meant to look deeply and think hard. And the truth is that Starmer and Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, had quite a long time to think this one through.
Yeah.
And all they've come up with is we're going to be tough on the gangs. Now,
smash the gangs.
that is not a sufficient response to the problem. And the problem is that, and I think probably we are on the spectrum of pro-immigration pretty far along, the pro-immigration side of things. But I do recognise that unless this is sorted in a way that I hope is compassionate and decent, but also visibly effective, this is going to get more and more toxic as an issue. And that's why, as they say in marketing meetings, circling back to Farage and his damn fool petition, that's why the whole thing connects.
Yeah.
Because that sentiment, that anger, will find places to go.
Yeah, it will. It will. I really do think that if we think the immigration challenge is on the way, and we're 100% wrong, I think it's still to come.
And there is a way, by the way, of dealing with it, but you have to be bold.
Yeah. All right. Listen, enough for this week, or for tonight, I should say. We'll be back on.
Plenty more this week.
We'll be back on Friday.
Back on Friday.
Have a fantastic week, folks.
Enjoy the week.
Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks to our producers at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill.
And we will see you on Friday. Enjoy the week.
Have a great week.